It's important to say that the opinions shared in this episode are just that, and they're ours alone. I urge each and every one of you to do your own homework before making any decisions. I'm Andy Signor, and this is Hugging the Cactus. To ensure you never miss a story, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to all alerts. It's the only way to ensure that YouTube will keep us in your feed. Hello everybody, welcome back to Hugging the Cactus. I'm Andy Signor and I'm here with Richard Hatch for part 2 of our exclusive interview. If you haven't watched part 1, I implore you to go watch that first. Richard gives a wonderful breakdown of his life before Survivor, how he got on Survivor, and then his experiences on Survivor, and how Survivor Season 1 especially cheated and beyond, his feelings on Jeff Probst, as well as his decision to come on Survivor All-Stars, and his experience with Sue Hawk, the alleged sexual violation that happened on All-Stars that we've broken down and really are having trouble quantifying what it actually was or what happened. Richard, thanks for being here again and continuing this conversation with me.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So where we left off last time was this incident with Sue. To recap for people who are coming in back, you had this moment with Sue that she was walking to you. I think it's really important that you clarified sexual harassment, sexual assault. All of these things are, have motives and intent to move forward and do something. You didn't approach her. She approached you. She grabbed onto you in a very close proximity that she knew she was going to be in close proximity to your junk. She made that decision to come there. She playfully had banter with you, and she moved on. And then the next day made this big speech saying she was sexually violated by you, and you had no idea any of this happened until months later, until the show aired. You had some more comments you wanted to add about the experience.
Well, anybody who's listened to me talk about this hears me defend myself because the facts are clear. I had nothing to do with that interaction. I truly was going through the game as anybody might. Yes, I chose to be naked. That's something I'd done through the whole first season and wore a kilt intentionally through the second season. And they hear me talking about the choices that Sue made. And I think people get the idea that I dislike her, the person, in a way that I want to caution them about. I don't dislike Sue, the person. I feel a little bit like I kind of understand her. And I hold CBS more responsible for what took place there than I do Sue. I do think Sue did something untoward. I think she intended to extort CBS. I think that was her actual plan. I think that's what she wanted to do from all the data that I have. But I don't think she's solely responsible for all of the things that unfolded. I think CBS had a responsibility to understand her emotional fragility from season 1. And by bringing her back into season 8, this all-star version, where she was even more determined to win, more disappointed that she really didn't have a shot, and probably, what people can't even fathom, more stressed. I don't think people will ever, unless they're on the show, understand the extent to which players are exhausted, depleted in ways that are difficult to describe. You aren't sleeping, you're bitten by bugs, you're sunburned, you're stressed in ways that you would never be stressed in real life. And by the time Sue had come to do what she was doing in that interaction and thereafter, I'm not sure all of what's behind it. I'm not sure if it was a break. I'm not sure how much of what she created was being felt honestly by her. I know she had to take on some of the real look of it in order to communicate it in a way that people would believe. But in doing so, in the state of depletion that she was in, I don't know, maybe she really did feel tormented, or whatever words she used, violated. All I know is I didn't violate her. I know it was her actions that caused all of that. I never touched her. I never intended anything toward her. She turned around and she came at me and created that. How much of a plan was behind it? I don't know. Those are all things that I've tried to share since then to explain it. But I'm truly the one who's suffered the consequences. She was paid off as a result of complaining about it and bringing this up. And I don't know the amount of the settlement. Same with Stacy Stillman. I don't know the number of dollars that each of those players were given, but I do know they were paid.
Have you talked to Sue since at all? When was the last sort of engagement you two had? Was it that show?
No, I think the last time we saw one another was at the 10-year reunion in LA. Would that have been after? Yeah, that would have been well after that incident. And I refused to take press pictures with that included her, like a Final Four and all of those kinds of things. I wanted no more to do with any of what had happened, what she did and what Kelly did when I was going through the tax evasion trial was just inexcusable from my perspective. Kelly was a young girl who was probably trying to make her way in the world. I get that, but to have lied about the cheating, and while I'm in court talking about what led to conversations about taxes between me and the executive producers, she was giving interviews saying, "Oh, I don't know what Richard's talking about. How could there be any cheating in Survivor?" when she's the one that had been being fed and was cheating. So I was angry, still am. Clearly made a decision to distance myself and to not participate with those two who I feel took things outside the game. You'll see that over the years I've talked at length about when a line is crossed, when people take things outside the game and affect the players and their families' lives. That's where I can't tolerate it anymore.
Well, that's a good segue then into other things outside the game. And obviously the next big defining moment of your life, which was the charge and conviction of tax evasion. This obviously is going to be a complicated portion of this talk because I know a lot of people don't understand how any of this actually works. I've watched a lot of your videos on this and you explain it pretty well. And I do believe, listening to a lot of the evidence and things you've already shared sort of on your YouTube channel, I believe you. I believe this was an unfair thing that happened to you. Can you share, how would you set this up? Can you tell the audience who maybe doesn't even know what happened?
So I was trying, in preparing the taxes for that year, 2000, to figure out who was owed what. Because we shot the show in Malaysia, by international law, Malaysian law, US law, taxes were owed to Malaysia that were required by law to have been paid by the company, CBS or Mark Burnett's SEG, Survivor Entertainment Group, before we left the island. I didn't know that we'd been snuck in or that Burnett had paid off somebody to put us on tourist visas. It didn't change the legal requirement, but it did prevent anybody in the States from knowing whether the taxes had been paid there or not. And nobody went after Burnett or CBS because they had such deep pockets. So I and my accountants approached the IRS and asked, what was paid to whom and what do we owe? Because the difference between what's paid to Malaysia and what would have been owed in the US is what I would have owed on the million. So if it was 27% owed to Malaysia and US would have charged 29, then I would have owed 2%. That's as simple as I can make it. So we were trying to figure that out, working with the IRS, my accountant, me, and the IRS, something called the triangle of trust. There was no anxiety. There was no problem. All we were doing was trying to figure out what that was. And the IRS took, I don't know, a year or two from the time that we were connected with them and trying to figure it out before they converted what was called a civil inquiry into a criminal inquiry. That's when I lost my mind. That's when I didn't know what the heck they were talking about, didn't know what it was told that that wasn't even a possibility because we were the ones looking for the information. They still hadn't figured out who owed what to whom, what had been paid to whom, none of that. So the idea that they could have expected me to have figured that out and then to have been evading taxes that weren't even owed is insane. So nobody was able to help me understand what was going on. And we just kind of went with it and continued with lawyers and accountants to try and unravel all of what was unfolding. But the problem is the media, the public, who I was perceived to be, that villain you talked about, that manipulative guy, prosecutors who wanted promotions. It's all corrupt, but went at me in a win at all costs approach that isn't what prosecutors are tasked with doing, but it is what they often tend to do. Withholding exculpatory information, coercing witnesses, paying people to threatening people to go on their side instead of mine, converting my accountant to their side-ish, where she would say things that, left it open for the possibility that I'd done something wrong. It's all insane as I watched it unfold, and I didn't really know what to do with it. I just tried to be honest. So to bring it all down into one as short as possible thing, what they call charged me with information, and they charged me with attempting to evade taxes. And they wanted me to say that that's what I did and plea. And I was furious. My lawyer said, you should do that. My accountant didn't say anything. I said, how can I stand in front of a judge and tell the judge that I did that when I didn't? I didn't attempt to evade anything. All I did was ask, what is owed to whom? And no one, including the IRS, could assess me to owe the taxes, tell me what I owed, and say, hey, this is what you owe, here's what you need to pay. They couldn't do it. They couldn't figure it out. So I refused, and they dropped that charge. People don't realize that. Oh, I thought, okay, great. My lawyer said, oh, don't be so comfortable. I don't know what they're doing. You could still be in trouble. I thought, what are you talking about? They just charged me and now they've dropped it because I refused to plea. 8 months later, they came back and they charged me with 10 counts: bank fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, charity fraud, all this crap that they made up to try and coerce me even more powerfully to plea. I was then facing 45 or 47 years in prison. All of this seemed Twilight Zone-ish to me, like incomprehensible. I'd not done anything wrong. I was the one that contacted the IRS. We were seeking information from them. This triangle of trust that's a legal thing among the taxpayer, the IRS, and the accountant was all supposedly working together to figure this out. But it didn't matter because of the way I was perceived in the public and what prosecutors wanted to do and what the IRS thugs and the prosecuting corrupt guys wanted to do to make a name and to cause other people in America to be afraid of the IRS. So they were going to force me to plea. And again, I just couldn't do it. I didn't do any of those things. Bank fraud, wire fraud, charity fraud. I created my own charity into which the only money that went was mine. So they thought they had a real shyster here, some bad guy, and they figured they would find stuff, I guess, is the reason that they did that. But I refused to plea again and took it to court and was acquitted of all of those things: bank fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, charity fraud, all of that. I was acquitted, but I was found guilty of attempting to evade taxes, the original charge. Infuriating, but I understood why, because the trial was as confusing to me, who was a part of it, as anyone else. There's no way anyone could have teased apart all of the obfuscation and dissembling that these experts used to complicate things and confuse the jury. So they went along with he must have attempted to evade taxes, I guess. That's the only thing I can think about because I didn't do it. And then that judge, who, there's a whole story behind that as well, someone I had confronted legally prior to this, who had an axe to grind with me, who held off his retirement in order to sit on my case. claimed I must have lied because I was found guilty of that charge. I was acquitted of all the other charges, but I was found guilty of attempting to evade taxes. So he added years to the sentence. I was sentenced to 51 months in prison, longer than anyone else in U.S. history for the amount of tax they claimed I owed. And I ended up serving every minute of it. That's a longer story too, but that judge required that I amend the tax returns and pay what's owed when I got out of prison. So when I got out of prison, you would think that's what would be done. But it was not legally possible to amend the tax return because I had not even been assessed to owe taxes at that point. I was out of prison and the assessment still wasn't completed. The IRS had not come up with an amount that I owed. They couldn't do an assessment because somehow it was confusing. So the judge who had ordered me to amend the returns and to pay what taxes were owed couldn't have known when he sentenced me to that wasn't legally possible, because nobody imagined that it wouldn't be years later. But it wasn't. And the prosecutors and the probation officers brought me back in and asked that I get 6 more months because I was violating probation by not amending the tax returns. The lawyers got up and said, it's not possible. It's legally not possible for him to amend the returns. But because the judge had said that I needed to, and I didn't, this judge who hated me gave me 9 months when the prosecutor was asking for 6, and I went back into prison. Nothing I could have done about it. Not possible for me to have amended the returns. Just part of our broken, corrupt system, particularly against the most disenfranchised of us. In this case, gay white guy, but it's usually black guys, and it's horrendous. It's just unquestionable how corrupt and broken it is.
It's so odd that they would spend so much time and energy on you for this. I mean, we see it every day in the news of these so many billionaires and people who sort of evade taxes. Facebook is finally getting fined. It's just, no one ever seems to go to jail for those when they actually are doing legitimate malicious intent behind it. You here won $1 million. I can't even imagine if I won $1 million, what I'm supposed to do to follow through. And I have an accountant that's trying to help me and save as much as I can. Like that could happen to any of us. What's your sort of advice on this of sort of like, what do we do in these sort of situations? And what did you learn from it that you can sort of share for the rest of us?
Yeah. So I put it in my longtime bank account on camera. I didn't hide it. I don't have offshore accounts. It was everything you just described. Incomprehensible that they would have pursued this, never mind pushed it to win at all costs, lying and withholding exculpatory information. But they did. That's what they do. And the undeniable facts are that people like Manafort, who has recently been proved to have evaded taxes for a decade or more in the millions and millions and millions of dollars, and done all kinds of other things that he was convicted of, all these felonies. He was given half the sentence that I was given. Because why? Because our system is corrupt. Those most in power, those most responsible for their actions, those who have the assistance, the people available to guide them, etc., end up with fewer consequences than do those disenfranchised of us who have the least ability to defend themselves and the least among us to kind of rise up and confront the corruption. It's crazy. So all I have is my voice. All I have is the ability to articulate as best I'm able exactly what took place. I am lucky. I'm bright. I'm well educated. I'm white. I'm a guy who in this system of ours has done okay and can kind of communicate well enough to help people understand what I encountered. Most people can't do that and just suffer. They and their families are abused and broken and tortured really in this system. And that's something I'm doing all I can to kind of bring light to. Not that I'll be able to change it, but at least I can help some people be aware and start to take responsibility for who we are as Americans doing this to one another. It's gross. It is absolutely grotesque.
You had to spend a lot of time in prison, and
I
I
did.
saw one of your videos sort of talking about the reality of that. Can you share some of that experience too?
Prison is horrible just from the standpoint of having to be confined. That in itself is very, very difficult. We talk about this country being free and American freedom, etc. It's tragic the way in which we take that freedom from people without cause, without justification, and in exaggerated ways. I think there was only one other person in the place I spent the most time, Morgantown, West Virginia, who claimed he was innocent, an Ohio professor, other than me. And but to a person, they all talked about the ways in which their charges were exaggerated, the ways in which their families suffered, the ways in which they were being abused by the system, lied about, evidence planted, etc. These guys had no reason to make this stuff up. A black guy with whom I was really, really close in prison was sent there because he had a joint when he was 16 or 17, and his second conviction was for taking 2 pounds of pot from Washington, D.C. to Oregon. And he was caught with that 2 pounds of marijuana going to Oregon and was given 25 years. So his mother died while he was in prison while I was there. Both of his kids grew up, one of whom is in prison while he was there. He's just now getting out of the system. It is horrific what we do to our other human beings.
You've been through a lot. Was that the worst phase for you? I mean, the show is Hugging the Cactus. I want to get to sort of, what were those darkest days for you? You've been through a lot, and then this sort of seems to happen. Does this experience top it as the worst for you? And if so, how did you face that experience and get through it?
So no. So this experience wasn't the worst. Again, as a bright guy who's really interested in who people are, I used every minute, which was torture within prison, to write and to think about who we are and to observe how we as Americans have not even decided whether we send people to prison to be punished or we send people to prison as punishment. They're very, very different things. If we send them there as punishment, they're confined, and the distance and detachment from their families is the punishment, and they're treated with respect as adults and human beings. If we send them there to be punished, then those people in charge do things to them and punish them in ways that they look to find to make it awful. And so since we haven't decided that, both take place. You have some guards who are compassionate and do their jobs, and you have some that are terribly mentally unstable who abuse the hell out of many, many, many of the people least able to defend themselves within the system. And so it's torture. It's torturous for people in ways that I bet most Americans would be appalled by if they understood.
That's amazing that you found the positive in it. I guess what I want to find out from you is, and I say this with love, there are a lot of people who see you as, oh, you know it all, right? You're a know-it-all, you're arrogant, you have sort of these qualities. But if there's something you're open to sharing, is there a moment of pain where you have really had to sort of embrace those, traits about yourself that you weren't proud of? Is there a moment of sort of openness you can sort of share to give us a little bit more about the real Richard Hatch and sort of a pain you've gone through?
Yeah, you're not going to like this answer. That whole idea of my being arrogant rests on how I approached the game of Survivor. And in fact, if you're going to use that as evidence of my arrogance, then I would have had to lose. I believed I could win. I went about it in a way that worked, and I won. So that approach wasn't arrogant. It was effective. I may have been arrogant in believing that the truth mattered in our court system, and pursuing it the way I did, refusing to plea, might not have been the best choice for me or my family. Perhaps I should have just bent over and said, yes, I did it, even when I didn't. So I'm not sure if that was arrogance on my part. I'm not sure if I could have made that choice. That's a part of me that I still can't bring myself to think about, standing up and saying I did something wrong that I didn't do. So I don't know. I understand why people perceive me as arrogant, because I am incredibly opinionated. I'm interested in always trying to hear other people's perspectives, listening to try and learn how people might look at things differently. But I very often have come to ideas of my own because I'm and have always been very introspective. And so I think about the ways in which I interact in the world, the ways in which the world pushes back on me and others. And talking about those things, I think, is part of what draws people to me, at least curiously. They may not like me, and I understand that, because people aren't often comfortable being confronted in the way they feel I confront them sometimes with ideas that they don't share, perceptions that differ from theirs, etc. But I don't think that's arrogance. If I were uninterested in others and my perspective, like Trump's narcissism, was what was most important, I think that's arrogance. I don't share that quality with him. I don't think. I would argue that I don't.
I think that's a fair distinction, because I don't know you. I know a lot of people who watch the show don't actually know you. And in talking to you, I think you're very confident. You are bold is a word you use to describe yourself. And that can be off-putting to some, right? It can be sort of a way to see arrogance. At the same time, I do think, in all these stories, you sort of have an answer for everything. Do you not think that there was any fault of your own doing in any of these experiences? Is, I guess, what I just want to put your feet to the fire on. Because look, this show, the reason I have the show, and you, even when we emailed, you said, I've hugged a lot of cactuses in my life. The idea of hugging the cactus for me and for others out there is to sort of, even when you've been wrong, there's that moment, at least when I had it, where I faced a part of myself in the mirror and said, you know what, I should have done that differently. I don't like while I didn't do that, I still don't like the way I handled this or handled that. Is there any sort of that experience you can share with us?
There are probably lots of places where I've been too over the top, kind of defensive of what I believe to be what happened. But my hesitance in saying that that's the way it should have been handled comes from those approaches being less than perfect, less than what would have been a better approach to help people understand it. Not from a place of my having wanted to do the right thing, a wrong thing. I've always wanted to do the right thing, and I've always been trying to do the right thing. Look, I'm human. This is more difficult than I ever communicate to people in real life. It's affected my life and my family in ways people won't know. Imagine leaving the courtroom after being told, even if you were going to be found guilty, which you won't, you'll have time to put your life together. They put you in handcuffs, leg irons, waist chains, put you in a darkened van and drive you out of state because you're a celebrity. Lock you in solitary confinement, where I sat for the next 2 weeks. There are plenty of times when I cried in those 2 weeks about what on earth happened and what could I do differently, and where on earth could I have changed the course of this action so that, it would be more fair. But I'm not the one in control, and I'm confidently expressing what I believe are truths, what I believe is reality, because that's all I have left to do. I don't know where I went wrong or what I could have done better or differently. I don't know literally what I did that I shouldn't have done. Let's say with the tax evasion. If I were evading taxes, I would try to say, well, I shouldn't have tried to hide it, or I shouldn't have tried to evade it, but I didn't. I contacted the IRS. When it comes to Survivor, if I was off-putting to a producer, or I was cocky from their perspective, and so they didn't know what to do with me afterwards, maybe I could think of a way to do that better with producers. But I did what I needed to do to win the game. What I'm facing is what a lot of people face, where being a gay guy, being an atheist, another part of what was brought up in court and is very, very public, enables others to distance themselves from me and to dislike me in ways that they wouldn't do for other people. And so I hold myself accountable. And if you come to me with a suggestion about what I've done wrong or could have done differently, I will be all ears. I will want to explore it and take it apart and think it through in ways that I hope you would appreciate. But when you ask me what I did wrong, I really don't know that there's anything meaningful that I can bring up and say that it could even slightly compare to the ways in which this system abused me and continues to abuse so many people.
I'm inspired by that answer because, look, I'm only pushing because I know a lot of people have a vendetta against you. And I want to ask the tough questions to ensure that you're really opening up and answering them, because I'm with you. It's inspiring to see the confidence, because I think so many of us don't have that when we're kicked down by society or, the man or whoever you want to say it by. It's easy to sort of bow down and say yes, and give in to things that you didn't even do. So I do applaud your standing up to it all and for sharing.
Well, it's hard earned, Andy. It's hard earned. I mean, we haven't even talked about the ways in my personal life that it's been that I've been affected, that it's been destructive. I lost my 14-year marriage, though. We could talk about all kinds of things. I mean, there's no way that the impact of what I've been going through ever since Survivor isn't what undermined that marriage. That guy was wonderful, and there's no reason he should have been subjected to the stresses that I brought into our lives. So there's just more than anyone could ever share in interviews. And I don't ever want to give the impression that I'm not human or that I don't feel it in ways that everybody else would feel it. And I'm not as confident as everybody thinks. But I have, in a hard-earned way, learned that no one else is going to share my perspective as accurately as I can. And so when I have an opportunity to do that, or to explore why others see it differently, I'm thrilled to do it and happy to. And I think that comes across as confidence.
Well, I think that hard-earned attitude of just not giving into that anymore is probably one of the reasons why you aren't on the new season of Survivor. If I were to speculate, it's clear you've stopped playing the game for them. You will say the reality instead of the production wants you, what the production wants you to say, and that clearly seems to be part of the reason why you're not there. But I want to get to that topic next. There's another backstory that's important for sort of the audience to know. In last season of Survivor, season 39, there was an incident with another player that caused up a sort of Me Too stir up that is still very confusing to me as to what actually happened. CBS has been confusing about what actually happened. We haven't really been given extra footage. This player, Dan, was accused of rubbing up and touching and being inappropriate with another contestant named Kelly, and she has been very vocal about being uncomfortable by Dan. And so far with what I've seen, I have to listen to Kelly, and I haven't heard much from Dan to sort of defend otherwise, which is really interesting. I don't know if that's CBS is doing or Dan's doing, but beyond Dan's story, that's Dan's story to be told. That kicked up a lot of sort of drama for CBS and for Survivor in the way they handled it. Kelly sort of brought this up to the producer's attention. They ignored it. He continued to sort of make her feel uncomfortable. It became a big moment where they kicked him out of the show, and for the first time had a graphic sort of explaining which, and Jeff came to the beach to tell the contestants, and they had this sort of serious moment and really kick Dan under the bus. Dan was also not invited back to the reunion special to sort of allow any opportunity to say his side of things, which is frustrating. But all of this drama kicked into the sort of right before the production of season 40, where, for those that don't know, Richard was invited to participate in. Seems to be another reason why you weren't invited. So I want to stop talking and allow you to sort of explain it, but I want to make sure my audience had a little bit of the backstory of what happened. But go ahead. Can you elaborate further on you being approached for season 40 and why you aren't in it?
So part of what you just laid out is more evidence of Jeff Probst's despicability. despicableness. I don't know what the right word is, but the way he handled that season is despicable. So I'm not taking anybody's sides, and I saw what you saw. And it is exactly as you described that viewers are left wondering about. Did Dan do this? Did Dan do that? Kelly says this, Kelly says that, etc. But there's only one group of folk who know what actually happened. And that's CBS and the producers. That's Jeff Probst. They know what happened, and they choose not to share it, and they choose to leave it lingering the way it is. I've met personally with many of the players on that season, and you'll notice they aren't speaking. You say, Dan wasn't invited back to the show. Many of the players planned not to go back to the show for the reunion special. Some didn't, but many planned not to. Pressure from CBS and just personal pressure from this is an opportunity in life. This was supposed to be a wonderful experience for these people, brought many of them back to that reunion special. You know, they're young. This was an opportunity to just try and continue. It was going to be handled the way the people in charge are handling it, regardless of what they did. And that's kind of the way things play out. So I don't know whether, in fact, there were real issues of sexual harassment or not. I heard Kelly's comments. I also heard Kelly tell the camera that she did not tell Dan because she was concerned about how it would impact the game. So I don't know the dynamics of when that took place or when it didn't. I know CBS chose not to remove Dan from the game until much later when they say, off camera, he touched a producer in an untoward way when he fell getting onto a boat. I've talked to many people who were there, and so I have more data about that incident as well. I'm not interested in sharing the details of that data. I love the way you laid it out. That's what's in the general public right now. There is a lack of clarity, and CBS is choosing not to address it for lots of reasons. I'll say those reasons are because CBS and Probst are responsible for it. It's their responsibility. And I think their handling of that incident and many prior to it is despicable. And the rubbers come to meet the road here, where they are being perceived accurately as people who are abusing a wonderful platform that is Survivor. So here's what I mean by that. Jeff, in his coded language and dog whistle, has decided to publicly say that I'm not coming back to 40 because he decided I was not part of the family anymore. It's a family-oriented show, and that I don't represent them anymore. And that's just a lie. It's just bold, media, manipulative approach that is intended to scapegoat me to prevent them from being seen the way they are responsible for what took place. They have staff assigned to manipulate the media. They've had it there in place long before Survivor started, but they've had specific people involved since Survivor first aired, all designed to make CBS and the people behind Survivor look as good as possible, regardless of the facts. And Jeff's participation now as executive producer is inexcusable. He's an awful human being for doing what he's done, blatantly lying about somebody without regard for the impact on me or the impact on the show itself. I was not only invited, I was told you're in by the producers, by the casting director. Every person who had a say in who they wanted on this season, he said, you're the only one who everyone to a person wanted back. You're in. Done. They paid for my physical. They coordinated all of the prep work that needed to get done before I was approved and invited back. I then, because of that, told them, okay, I'm in, that I'm going to withdraw from my last semester of my PhD program, which I'd already paid for. And I did. 2 days before I was to fly out, they called and said, the process has been paused, is what they said, something like that. And I said, I don't believe you. And he said, I told them you wouldn't believe me. And I said, I don't. And I've never heard from them since. But the timing suggests that it was related to how they feel if I were included. Perhaps the conversation around what is sexual harassment would have continued. I think they have a responsibility to continue that conversation. I think they should have included me and let reality be exposed, let what's true unfold. And they chose not to. I think it's absolutely awful. And it's just a piece of evidence of what they do and why they do it that is abhorrent to me. These people who've become wealthy and have such power have no need. It is not necessary to abuse others who've helped them get there, who are still in the process of living their lives, and they don't care. They'll take advantage of anyone in the process underneath them to whatever extent they can, without regard for the impact on those participants.
It's also ironic and hypocritical because you were invited back for Heroes versus Villains, I'm told, for several other seasons to sort of
Redemption
prove
Island.
that Survivor was okay inviting Richard Hatch back, that you were clearly family friendly. You've been on 2 times. So I agree with you. It's a frustrating, it's the first time where I absolutely, I mean, I'm hearing a lot of accusations now, but it's the first time I saw Jeff Probst say something where I'm like, whoa, dude, that's not cool. I mean, if you're not going to have you on, just don't make a comment, right? That's where I feel like he should have been. And I do think he owes you more than that. The way they've treated you isn't fair. I do give you a lot of credit for the game. I think a lot of fans do. And I've seen people like Russell, who I know you guys have sort of a fun online beef. I've seen others sort of like, oh, well, Richard wouldn't, someone else would have invented the alliance and do everything. But I think that's not fair because the show wouldn't have existed and kept going had you not kept it so interesting. I'm sorry. You were the character that I was invested in the most, surrounded by these other characters, and without that sort of seemingly villain who was just smart, who knew how to play the game and to trick everybody and surprise us. That's what the game, why it was exciting. It wasn't as exciting in Australia and Africa. It just wasn't as they tried, and they've been trying to rebuild it ever since. And it gets so convoluted sometimes with idols and things because they're trying to just reinvent and keep that surprise energy that you did totally invent. Do you consider yourself a pioneer of the format, and do you feel like you're not credited enough for it? Or do you think some people may have a point in saying, come on, Richard, somebody else would have eventually figured out how to do an alliance?
I don't think it's about figuring out how to do an alliance. I think I figured out the game and approached the game and life in a way that is interesting to folk. And I think, yes, this is part of where the arrogance and ego that people think about me comes from. I think I should have some credit for how the show unfolded and how it continues. I think what I chose to do was unique. And I don't think well, you saw it wasn't duplicated, and it wasn't even understood for long periods of time. But don't take my word for that. Look at the Paley Center interviews with Jeff Probst and Mark Burnett. Jeff Probst has in several interviews thanked me for his having a house, for his having a wife, for Survivor continuing to this day. He has specifically said he didn't know if it would, were it not for me. Those interviews are on tape. They're available for people. And so this idea out of the blue that he can just do whatever he wants, lying in a way that enables him to disadvantage me and viewers of the game, isn't reasonable. It's not something we should tolerate. I love the game of Survivor, so I don't want people to stop watching. I just want them to understand that the game itself is separate from the bullies behind it who produced that game. They aren't deserving of how they benefit from such a great game as Survivor. But that's life. It is what it is. And all I have, as I've said before, is my ability to communicate what I believe are the facts. So that's what I'm doing.
I have a question that relates a bit more to me, but I think can relate to anybody. Was there a choice that, or even just a hesitation of being so vocal against these people? Because it's gonna make you potentially seem petty. It's gonna make you seem angry. And I think a lot of times when we're wronged or we feel like we're wronged, there's this sort of need and desire to fight back and call people out for sort of the injustice that they've given. And there's sometimes that, internal choice and conflict of, do I really need to make this fight? Is this going to make me seem like the better person? What is your advice to people who may be struggling with that? And was there sort of any sort of pause you gave yourself before you started calling out Jeff Probst so vocally?
Andy, I absolutely love this question. You just asked if my calling Jeff out and talking about this in this way is going to make me look like the better person. I couldn't give a shit. I just don't care. That is not my motivation. I think it's unlikely to make me look like the better person for some segment of the population who isn't interested in really thinking through what might be true about what I'm saying. Many people aren't interested in Survivor or the superficiality of it and all that. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about deeper issues. I'm talking about who we are as human beings. I wrote a book called Reality Matters, which isn't published yet. Reality being what's true. I think it matters, or it should. And I talk from a place of wanting people to have more information so they can decide for themselves. I think you're absolutely right that it could be something that causes people to think that all I am is angry, I'm vindictive, I'm doing this only because they didn't bring me back, etc. I thought through at length for years what to talk about and what not to talk about. There is much that I've not talked about, and that has to do, you'll hear me rarely, if ever, talking about the other incidents of which I'm aware where producers have abused other contestants. That's not my place. If those people want to share those stories, if they want to come forward and talk about the ways in which CBS has undermined them, is abusing them, takes advantage of their position, then I'll support them in that. But when it comes to me and my story, I don't care if they invite me back. Everyone knows I would love to play the game. But to have invited me back on season 40, all winners, the first all winners season, and to not have the innovator of the game back there says to me that they don't care enough about who I am and my contribution to the game for me to care about whether they invite me back or not. I just can't live my life, won't live my life kind of threatened by the idea they might not bring me back. So therefore I ought to be quiet and not say anything. That makes no sense to me. And other people are harmed in the meantime. Most people don't think of Jeff the way I'm describing him. But Probst is an awful person. And he's a great host. He looks super on TV. But he's an actor. All of his lines are prepared. He thinks, he plans. All of his appearances are scripted. They know what he's going to do and when he's going to say it. That's separate from all the other participants on the game that we're watching and we're drawn to because they cause us to become more introspective, because we're intrigued by whether we'd make the choices they would or not. Jeff's separate from that. And if we as viewers don't understand that that person is separate from the other people, we give him too much credit. And that power has gone to his head, unfortunately.
Look, as a fan of the game, that is sad to hear, but I hear you. And I think your words there are very wise. I think for a lot of people who I'm interviewing or people who are watching this who may have gone through their own cancellation or their own sort of downfall, what you just said about sort of not giving a shit anymore, that freeing feeling of sort of what can I still have left to lose when a society has turned on me, is sort of a strength that I think unites us, and I relate to wholeheartedly. Of what else is there to do if you can't be free and amongst the chains of just saying what you feel and what is true to your heart? And so I commend you for being at that place, and I hope these words and this interview is inspiring to others to sort of get to that point, because I don't think you're arrogant in talking to you now for 2 hours. I don't think you're arrogant at all. I think you're a very smart guy. I think you're very confident in your skin. You seem very happy in the place you are, given all the things you've been through, and that's very admirable. That's all we can ask as people and humans, is to find happiness in our life. Are you happy now? Are you in a better place? Do you feel like you're on an uptick now to sort of go to bigger and better things?
At the risk of being Debbie Downer, no. I am compelled to speak in the ways that I am with you and the ways that I'm sharing on my YouTube channel, because what's real, what's true, reality matters to me. And that's a part of my life that drives me. And it does make me happy to do that. But I can't even begin to underestimate for you, or I would hate to underestimate for you, or to underplay the negativity that has been foisted upon me by these situations and by people without cause. I mean, they just really shouldn't, these things, the tax evasion, the prison, the survivor reaction to scapegoat me, they shouldn't have been done to me. And they've had horrible, lasting effects on my life, on my family, and on who I am. So I'm not going to just answer the way it would be great to end this interview. Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, oh, yeah, everything's great, because I'm not. I'm still, like all of us, moving through this world one step at a time, crushed by a recent divorce that I never saw coming and would have done anything to avoid. Sharing the journey for me is the point. So as a 58-year-old guy out here now, single and looking, dating is a whole new experience I had never wanted to be part of. And life, just for me, is what it is. It's okay, and I'm capable, as you see. But I'm not happy yet, and I think happiness is the goal. I think success is happiness, and happiness is success, and hopefully I'm headed there. So there's some optimism.
You should feel happy in that your persona is going to make others feel more confident and happy. But I think, I appreciate that openness because we have to put on an air of happiness when we do interviews. I've been there. We have to sort of convey, yeah, things are okay, but it takes real vulnerability to admit it's not. And I think it's, we're not the only ones going through that problem. Happiness is always the key. And sometimes we try to climb that ladder too high or get too stuck on the things we don't have that we sort of lose focus of where our happiness is. But in talking to you for 2 hours, I can offer your confidence is a good place to be. And whether it's just for this interview or reality, I appreciate that confidence because it's inspiring to me. I hope it's inspiring to others. And I hope you find more of that happiness off camera as well in your personal life and everywhere else, because I'm with you. And the goal of this whole interview is to help right the wrongs that you've been through, to help tell the true story of Richard Hatch. And I feel like I've learned so much from you and inspired by, I hope this helps. And I hope people will rally behind you and support you in your future endeavors and in helping to clarify when people are saying things that are inaccurate about you online. I can only imagine that happens for you a lot. Rather than sort of hounding the things we've already done, what would you say? I'm curious as we wrap up, what would you say to Jeff Probst? Like how could this wrong be righted to you? Would you go back on the show? Is there something you would like to say to him directly? Is there something he or CBS or anybody out there? I mean, the government's going to be a hard one to get them to apologize, but maybe CBS and Jeff Probst could. Is there anything that would help you or something you'd love to hear from them?
Yeah, anything sincere would be, I'd be open to, and it'd be intriguing for me. So Mark Burnett, who told me I'm his family, we'll be connected forever on the beach. Jeff Probst, who, praised me for what I did and now just subtly backs away while he befriends other people and does what he can to help them. He just undermines me and scapegoats me. People like that aren't people for whom I have much respect. If they were to come to me and want to talk about the things they've never talked about, get to know who I am, stop using me as a scapegoat, I'd be open to listening. And I think it could be a powerful engagement. Do I expect either of them, Jeff Probst or Mark Burnett, would ever do that? They haven't yet. It's been 20 years. Why should I expect they would now?
So if we see you on Survivor Legends someday in the future, can we assume that you found some sort of medium with them? Or would you show up even if you don't get that?
Oh, no, indeed. There would have to be some kind of reckoning. How could I work for these people? How could I come back to a show that I love and play a game that I really, really enjoy while the people I'm interacting with who are in charge are pretending nothing happened? Just like I was not able to plea in the court proceedings. I couldn't pretend to do that. I'm not an actor. So, yeah, if you see me on Legends, you will rest assured I will have had a conversation with Probst, if not Probst and Burnett.
Well, listen, Richard, I'm sorry. It feels like you feel like you're left behind, and I hope you don't always feel that way, because just know from a fan here completely across the world, I look up to you. You were someone I watched on TV regularly and still think about. That is something I hope, inspires you and makes you feel good about yourself in a way of, we don't forget about you, man. You pioneered this this format, and I know there's a lot of viewers who are watching this who I'm sure share that my view of how we look up to you. And it hurts me to hear what you've gone through. It hurts me that you're not in a better place yet. I hope you're getting there. I think you will, given the confidence that you exude. That's always a good path towards it. But I do want to sort of offer my feelings towards you. I'm a big fan. I remain a big fan, and I'm an even bigger fan today because I'm really inspired by your honesty, your raw honesty. You don't give a shit anymore, and I think in this day and age, that's what we need more of, not less of. And so everybody else on that show who's sort of going to play towards CBS and not really tell us the truth, I'm not interested. This is what I'm interested in. I hope others are. If people are interested in this, Richard Hatch, please go support him over on his YouTube channel. Richard Hatch is the channel. You're also on social media, correct? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Where would you like to send people the most? Is there anywhere else they can sort of send you some love?
I think that's enough, but I also want to send you some love, Andy. Listen, this is a first. No one has as thoroughly investigated, talked with, been interested in the real story behind what's going on in my life. And so not only do I appreciate the feelings you've just expressed before me, but I even more appreciate what you're doing in Hugging the Cactus. I think these are the stories that might have the most hope of making a difference, and they're not being told. So kudos, super kudos to you for telling them. Much appreciated.
Well, thank you. I hope we can do another video. I want to get more Survivor nitty-gritty on my other channel. So at some point, let's keep this conversation going. I'm a supporter of yours. I'll help with anything you got brewing. Guys, please go show Richard some love over on his YouTube channel. Go subscribe. Go follow him on social media. And just give him a nod. I can't suggest that highly enough to people you looked up to, even people you used to look up to, the people you currently watch. You got to support your artists. You got to support your creators. You got to throw them a super chat once in a while, or sign up, or just a note of positivity. It really, really keeps us going in this world where we're now inundated with content and people moving on to the next popular thing. Always send some love out to the people you admire. Richard, I admire you. I'm so grateful for you giving us this time. Thank you so much for sharing all of this information. Guys, everybody go subscribe to him and stay tuned for more episodes like this over here on Hugging the Cactus. If you want more episodes like this, please subscribe here to Hugging the Cactus, and you can learn more over at uncanceled.com to support future seasons of this show. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can hear more stories like these by supporting us on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you find your podcasts. Please go leave us a good review and rating to help others find us. And if you know of a story that is worth sharing on this series, please reach out to me, Andy Signor, on social media, or visit Hugging the Cactus on Facebook. I'd also like to thank all of our Kickstarter donors. I couldn't have done this without you. If you'd like to support this series to keep it going, you can visit uncanceled.com. See you next episode.